tends to make us afraid to fail and therefore afraid to try.
Oh, I've got 7 points. I don't want to waste them.
Somebody just told a lie in the name of bro science, and
there's probably a chance I would have been successful. And that sucks.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin today at huntinfool.com. Welcome back to another Built to Hunt podcast. On today's episode, myself, Jerrod Lyle, am joined by the Garth Jensen. I'm going to do my best to get him stirred up. We're going to talk about a topic that is a fairly hot topic around the office. We call it paralysis by analysis. And what that means is that we have the privilege of consulting thousands of members a year. Garth, you yourself take several thousand calls a year.
Oh, no.
Yes, I know the numbers. I can pull the reports.
It could be then.
It is. It's easily into the multi-thousands. And those calls range from people who have a pile of points that they want to burn on coveted tags to people who just want to go on hunts. But one common theme that we all run into, and I think it's a common human nature tendency, is we get a little bit of paralysis by analysis when we start considering our options. And I was on a podcast with Robert Hanneman just recently, and he mentioned you've got to be willing to fail in order to be a good hunter and to have more memories, to have more fun. And I think you, probably better than anybody on our team, deals with more people who have paralysis. Well, you and Robert collectively probably have more paralysis by analysis calls than maybe anybody in the world, because you guys consult so many people. So I guess first of all, I'd like to ask you, what does that call look like in your mind? What's the classic paralysis by analysis call look like, and how does it kind of go down, and how do you navigate that, etc.?
Well, I'm glad you said that it's a common human nature thing. I mean, just this morning I was telling Isaiah, I said, God, well, the basic theme is you don't want, you feel like you want to spend your points or the lack thereof equal to the hunt.
Yep.
Like you don't want to, quote, burn any.
Right. Leave any on the table.
Sure. And it's just like this morning I walked in and I'm like, God, I was going to buy Tesla stock at $6.98 and I didn't buy it. And I was like, nah, it might go down a little more. And then it got up to $7.20 and I'm like, I can't do it now. Can't do it now because it's going to cost more than $6.98. And then it's at $7.47 this morning, and I'm like, God, I should have got it $7.20, but I'm not going to buy it now because it's already up higher than what it was, and so I'm not getting as good a value. So I'm like, well, so it's the same thing with points, right? I mean, I would say that's kind of the common theme when I'm talking to somebody on the phone is it worth it? Like that's the biggest, is it worth it to come out here and go on X hunt for this many points, or for the drive, for specifically if it's an over the counter, it's trying to put a value on. I mean, everyone has to put a value on their time, but at the end of the day, what I've ran into as far as just in my own hunting career, the value isn't necessarily in the hunt, and that's the hard thing. In the harvest. And a lot of people, when they put that value on there, that's the value they're placing on it is the harvest. Well, how big a buck am I going to get? Right. How big a bull am I going to get? Oh, I've got 7 points. I don't want to waste them. Wasting is a hard thing for me to look at this day and age. And the only reason I say that, I used to look at it all the time as wasting points if I didn't find X animal. This was what I should find for this many points. But with populations, they fluctuate, and you kind of notice that once you've been in the game for a while. I mean, what you started out applying for doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to get 15 years down the road, even 3 years down the road. So that's where I feel like most people have that paralysis by analysis, because they just, they're all set to burn them, they're ready, they're geared up, and then they hear one little thing about that hunt that might be like,
scares them.
I don't know. Like, I talked to Joe. Joe said he went into that same area, said there was people everywhere. Couldn't find an elk. Now, Joe might have been the only one that didn't find an elk in that area.
Right.
Tim, Steve, and Bob all found elk and killed bulls, and it was a great hunt. That's why everyone was in that area. But Joe had a horrible hunt, and just because I talked to one person or found out one piece of information, as minute as it might have been, it's like, pump the brakes. I don't know.
Well, I think that brings up a really good point, because one of the places that I tend to hear people pull back after they've kind of committed to a tag or an opportunity is I talked to a resident hunter in here, right? That's one of the things that I hear frequently. And having been lucky to be a resident of states like Idaho for 25 years, Montana for 16 years, now Utah for the last few, and have those backyard opportunities, the truth of the matter is our population is growing. More and more outdoor recreation is occurring, even if it's non-hunting, right?
Yeah.
You go up on the Monroe in Utah in the summer and you're going to be inundated. You can barely get across half of the forest roads because of the side-by-side traffic that's up there just ripping around having a good time. So it gives you the feeling that it's crowded and that there's a lot going on. And I think in general, residents, you know, and I'm like this too, we have a tendency to look at what the glory days looked like. You know, there were bigger bucks back then. There was less people back then. In most cases, both of those are true. But is it worth putting off an opportunity today because you talked to a cranky old resident like Jerrod Lyle who said, it used to be great around Salmon, Idaho, and, you know, we didn't have anybody around here. And now you're like, oh, geez, maybe I don't want that salmon B tag. Maybe I don't want that limb high zone A tag because Jerrod says that it's gone way downhill.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things that I hear a lot.
Well, and I have to, like, because I take a lot of Colorado calls, and most residents that have lived in Colorado for 15, 20 plus years, 100%, they will tell anyone and everyone that wants to listen that has not hunted that state for very long, for elk particularly, and deer, but elk, they will voice their opinion. They'll say, oh, like the elk numbers are horrific in Colorado right now. There's not even a tenth of what used to be on the landscape. We used to go up into this area and you would see herds of 20, 30, sometimes hundreds later in the season. And, you know, it was no big thing to go out and find your bull, shoot it, and go home in a weekend. Well, that's probably not the case now. I mean, it's a tougher hunt. But if you're taking a guy from Washington who's used to hunting that rat race up there,
right,
you know, and going through that stuff, and you're telling him, nah, this is no good hunting up here, he might go over there and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is the best hunt on earth.
Or Pennsylvania, where in one county they have more hunters than in some of our entire western states, right?
Yeah. I mean, the first year I ever went to Colorado, I think it was 2001. When I got there, I was astonished because I had been hunting general any weapon bull, and it was a big deal if you shot a bull.
Right.
Like, if you saw a bull on that hunt,
you won.
Yeah, it was a good deal. I mean, the first time I'll never forget, I hunted for 3 years before I actually was within rifle range of a bull, and it was a spike. I got so nervous, I tried to kneel down for a shot at 40 yards. And then I realized I was too deep in the grass, and I was like, oh, I got to stand up. When I stood up, he ran off. So, but that's how nervous I was because I had never, like, I had worked for 3 years, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my God, it's
happening.
Happen.
It's happening.
Yes. So when I got over there, and I'm glassing for deer, and all I can find is elk, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I can buy a tag over the counter. And me, I didn't even have a tag.
Right.
I mean,
you were on a deer hunt.
And I was a young punk. I was like, man, I can't afford an elk tag too. There's no way. I barely scrounged up this old Army teepee tent that I could throw me and my buddies in,
right,
and have a little bit of a fire. So, but
I bet you had whiskey though.
No, that was before I was of age.
Oh well, I bet you had whiskey though.
So, at that point in time, it was just an eye-opening experience. I'll never forget that the difference is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
It's not necessarily, like, say, you talk to those old-timers that have been there for years and years, it might suck for them, like, because they can remember those glory days. But someone that doesn't know about those glory days, they're still in for a great hunt.
Yeah, some of my farther removed family has lived in Utah for generations, and I've got photos. I'm not proud of this fact because this is part of the problem, right? But I've got photos of their old dump trucks. They had coal mines here in Utah, of dump trucks full of 25 to 33-inch bucks, like just whole, you know. So yeah, is the heyday like that ever going to be again? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So residents were one thing I wanted to touch on because you do get a lot, whether you're at a trailhead and you run into some disgruntled resident that's grumpy that everybody's in, his or her old honey hole, or whether you're online or however. I mean, today we have more information than ever, which is the next thing I kind of wanted to gripe about, and that is there's literally no requirement to have any sort of pedigree to have an opinion that is easily and readily shared across the board these days, right? Between social media, YouTube, there's no barriers to entry. Even podcasts. There's a lot of podcasts that I hear where I'm like, whoa, that information was actually completely and totally inaccurate. Like somebody just told a lie in the name of bro science, and whoever's listening to that from whatever other state is buying into that because they think that this person must have the capacity to speak on behalf of big game management or whatever else. So my next big beef is the sources that people turn to when it comes time to start doing that secondary research, right? So I think Hunt and Fool is a primary research source. I think people look to us, Garth, when you read a state section, you're going to talk to wildlife biologists, you're going to talk to hunters who have hunted the unit in the last couple of years, most often hunters who have hunted in the last year. You're going to talk to outfitters who spend hundreds of days a year in these units. We're going to collectively put all that data together and create a state section. So people rightfully look to Hunt and Fool as a primary source. And so then you get on a call, somebody says, I got X points in Colorado. What unit should I go for? You give them 2 or 3 choices, outline kind of the habitat differences, and then they start doing secondary research.
Well,
and that's where the wheels can come off the bus because, again, there's all these unverified sources out there making noise. But, I mean, what do you deal with that? Yeah,
and I'm not advocating that, hey, like what we say is gospel and you shouldn't take anyone else's word, or investigate other avenues and talk to other people, because I think more information you can get to a certain extent is good, right? I mean, you need to do your due diligence when you're researching, especially if you've got a fair amount of points. But like I just know with specifically Colorado deer, just the cluster it's been within last year and this year's draw, where the season dates got pushed back. Points jump, points drop. They just went all over the board because people were so excited to get a tag and they didn't want to miss out, and they were, quote, overspending the points they had on certain areas just to guarantee they could get it. And gosh dang, I mean, it's tough because I do run into that. Like, hey, I looked on this website and it said that I was guaranteed to draw this last year at 11 points. I have 11 points, so pretty much, and I'm like, well, last year, I guess you would have been guaranteed that if you would have had 11 points, but you had 10 last year, Yep. So that's not going to transition into this year. And just based off of the information and the people I spoke with and the hype that is around that specific area, you might want to look at something else that's comparable. And that's why when I have those conversations, I try to figure out, okay, why did you select this area? What do you want to hunt? Right. You know what I mean? What
do you expect from the hunt?
What type of hunt do you want?
Right.
And then after that, then we can talk about the unit you've selected and see if, you probably just ought to ride that one out and see if eventually you can catch up to it, or, maybe you might get it this year. But here's some other areas that might fit the bill. And then inevitably, like say, they might do some research and somebody says, hey, not that unit. It's overrated. You're overspending your points. And I mean, try to do the best we can, but I mean, I've talked to guys this year that were like, going into it, like, I just want to get the most out of my points, and so I'm going to go into that hunt. I'm going to spend this many points on here. I talked to so-and-so, and they don't think it's going to be a big deal, and they think that we can probably draw that tag. Draws come out, they don't draw the tag.
Right.
I'm not shocked.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
They might be a little shocked, but I'm like, no, I kind of figured that was going to happen. But I don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is I don't want to sound like I know what that draw is going to be, because I mean, there was like 68 in Colorado this year. It spiked last year. Everyone jumped on it. Third season. Well, it dropped. Came back down to where it had, the years prior.
Didn't make any sense necessarily.
No, it didn't. It's just some of those things happen, and I probably would have went into it saying, oh, no, I mean, I don't think you would have drawn, based off last year it was whatever, 10, 11. probably wouldn't have drawn this year. Well, you would have.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it happens.
Colorado had been one of those weird states. I mean, we mentioned Colorado a lot in this podcast, but it's got more opportunity, arguably, than most other states do, especially at this point in time. So it's an important one that we take a lot of calls on. We do a lot of research on. Most of our guys try to hunt it at least once a year. But Colorado was one of those that was pretty easy to predict for the longest time because they didn't really change quotas and season dates a lot. They didn't really get too randy with their decisions until they moved those deer dates way back, and then that kind of wrecked the whole thing. And I think it's going to take years for that to settle down.
Well,
because people are gonna now. It's more like you see things like a state like Idaho that's truly random, right?
Yep.
No point system, random draw odds every single time. They only look at your first choice before they look at a second choice, right? Idaho is one of those that's total chaos at times too, especially on like moose and some of those other hunts, because it'll be like one year this unit had really good draw odds, and so then you can almost predict that the next year pile of people are going to go into that unit thinking, well, that's the unit that has better draw odds, and it's almost like an opposite effect. And I think Colorado's going to be more like that for the next few years with deer as it kind of settles out a little.
It's going to be volatile.
Yeah.
And
if you spend all your time listening to the wrong source, well, I shouldn't even say the wrong source, but if you just take all this feedback in and you don't have a filter, a responsible filter that says, these are my more credible sources. These are like tier 2 sources. These are maybe like tier 3 sources, like some dude spouting off on Instagram, right? Then you can kind of get yanked around and have paralysis by analysis and not go on hunts.
And sometimes that's where too much information causes that paralysis by analysis, because now all of a sudden you've got into it with thinking one thing and at least had an idea of what you wanted to accomplish that year. And now you get all this information coming in from all different directions, and some of that information cancels out other information you got, and it's totally opposite. And so you're just so confused going into it. You're like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to write it out and build another point and do some more research next year. When, honestly, when you go into that decision-making process, you probably should have a pretty good idea of what you want to get out of it, like have a game plan of where you want to be that year. Somewhat stick to that.
Yeah.
Like, keep that in your mind when making those decisions and not get too overwhelmed and be like, oh, my gosh.
I'm just going to quit.
Yeah, I just points.
Pufferfish.
Points.
Yep.
And I feel so bad for guys that have 25. Well, I do and I don't, right? But when I get that call and guys are like, hey, I got 24 points, 25 points. What's the best unit I can get over there in Colorado right now? Like, I've got enough points. I just want to use them. I want to go on the best hunt possible. And, I want to take the biggest buck possible. What should I do? And I'm like, I kind of want to say you should have hunted the last 25 years.
6 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because realistically, what they could have hunted with 5 points 20 years prior would have been
better than
head
what
and
they
shoulders
yeah.
better than what they can get now.
Yeah.
And
overall, wouldn't you say the trend across all states, again, we keep talking Colorado, but across all states, that's becoming more and more true?
Nevada, like, I'm in the situation in Nevada, and I think a lot of people are in this situation. It's a random state, so you can't really guarantee when you're going to get it. I mean, they give you points. I call them participation points.
Trophies.
I mean, it's just like, hey, here you go. Here's a point for your effort. Oh, cool. Like, what am I going to do with this point? I got 20 points there.
For deer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if I would have been smarter when I started applying and not thought that, oh, yeah, man, in 6 years I'm going to get one of the better units, if I would have just tried to actively draw in that first 5, 6, 7 years,
yep,
I would have drawn.
Yeah,
and I probably would have went on a hunt and had a better time then than I would now.
Right.
Now,
yeah, better hunt then on 5 points than your 20 is going to get you today.
Like this year, I puffer fished the hell out of Nevada. I was like, I don't know if I want to tag there.
Most of us felt that way.
So
yeah, the deer numbers are in rough shape there.
So I think you're right. Across the West, that's just the nature of the beast.
It doesn't matter where it's at. The quality, if you're talking inches of bone, is going downhill for what the same ratio of points get you or got you back then. So
it's like inflation. The dollar 20 years ago was a hell of a
worth
lot better
more.
than it is $1 now.
Yeah. especially at the gas pump, huh?
Yeah.
So speaking of points, I'll use a personal example. So in Colorado, I'm going to be at like 19 deer points this year, or 20, something like that, which I know is shameful. I see it in your eyes, Garth. You're literally like, you idiot. And I know that's truth. But like, I think last year when I was talking about possibly cashing them in on an archery tag, you were encouraging me to leave like 10 points on the table.
Well, because
eight points on the table. You were like, this is the unit that's going to fit your expectations. You're going to have a fantastic hunt. Don't worry about leaving 8 extra years on the table. Talk to me a little bit about that.
The problem
because you touched on it at the top of the podcast. I think it's a super important topic.
So the biggest problem is because there's not another archery hunt over there that's going to swallow all your points.
Right.
Like they will. I should say, they'll swallow all your points if you draw, but you're going to inevitably leave points on the table because
8 to 15 points on the table.
The only ones that are really garnering that many points are your rifle hunts.
Right.
So, I mean.
But even then, you told me, because I was like, well, shoot, I'll get more of a rut hunt, gun tag, and hunt it with my bow. And you're like, I think you'll have a better hunt. You'll enjoy your hunt more if you leave all of those points on the table and just come back to your September archery hunt and hunt this unit.
Yeah. Well, I guess depending, like, what you were looking for out of a hunt,
sure.
Right? What I envision out of those November, you're going to see those bucks. It's going to be a cool hunt, but trying to get in there with a bow in knee-deep snow and they're surrounded by 30, 40 does, that to me is not a fun hunt, and it's 5 days.
Right.
So you start looking those 5 days in the barrel, and you're like, man, I've stalked this buck for 3 now.
Yeah.
He's not getting any closer to getting killed. Whereas September, they're bachelored up, and you're hunting smaller groups.
Yep.
You can pinpoint their location. They're in those areas day after day after day. They're not roaming from doe camp to doe camp trying to find one that's hot. So that's why it's just, in my opinion, with a bow hunt, you need time.
Yes.
You need the right stock opportunity, and that's what offers you that opportunity over there.
And that's why you're willing to throw 10 years, Garth, a decade of my points in the trash.
Well, what did I tell you first? I told you hunt with a gun, and you said no. So,
well, that's fair enough.
Seems how you didn't want to hunt with a gun. I was like, well, then this is the route I go.
But the point is, right, this is the big point with this whole paralysis by analysis thing is figure out your why. Figure out what you love and want out of a hunt. And for me personally, I do enjoy archery more. I have for 20 years. Nothing against gun hunting. In fact, by the end of me getting my butt kicked every archery season, I'm ready to watch somebody with a gun mow things down.
Yep.
Take vengeance on all of my spoiled stocks,
yes.
Right? So I got nothing against it. I just personally enjoy that intimate side of it more.
Yeah.
But getting comfortable with that means that I also am comfortable with the notion that when I finally do apply in Colorado for deer, I'm going to leave a bunch of points on the table.
But like the other side of that is,
doesn't mean I'm not going to keep building them in the meantime.
Correct, but you know what you want. You know what I mean? Like, you absolutely know what you want. So when you were building those points all along, you were participating in other hunts that meant more to you
Correct.
Than burning your points in Colorado. So just you accumulated those points, I don't want to say by luck, but just by happenstance, you have 20 points.
Yep.
Like, you had other hunts you were going on in the meantime. But now I think you probably knew then, like, hey, I got more points than I need. Because you've said that for years now. I've got more points than I need. I know that. But there's a lot of people that don't understand that.
Right.
And they don't understand the logic behind it. They're like, well, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean?
Right. They feel like every point should get you one step incrementally closer to a bigger buck.
Yes.
Or a better experience.
Yes.
And it's not true. In Wyoming, both you and I are past where we need to be now, as of this year, because we were both vowed that the next time we go back to Wyoming, we're going to do general, and the second we can draw general, we're going to do it. And now we're like 2 years past it, and still putting in for points only.
I know.
But it's opportunity, right? But that's the difference. That's the one thing here. I mean, don't get us wrong. The one thing I do want to touch on, we have paralysis by analysis too. Garth and I just, last week, got all stirred up. I was going to get a Colorado turnback tag so it wouldn't burn those 20 points. And go hunt a high country deer for the first time forever because I don't have a really solid September plan. Garth was going to buy an OTC archery tag. We were going to go film it, have a great time. And within a week, we changed our mind.
Yeah.
Literally yesterday, you're like, do you think we got overly excited? I'm like, yeah, I do. And we're back off of that plan. So we have it too. It's just the difference is, like, wherever you're sitting, if you're in Missouri listening to this podcast, if you're in, Nevada, California, wherever you're at, go hunting. We have paralysis by analysis on exploring our options, including our point portfolio. But what we won't do is sit home this fall.
Yeah.
We're going to burn a ton of boot leather up. We're going to get our butts kicked on plenty of hunts. And we're going to probably occasionally get lucky and fill the freezer.
But to your point, there is options out there. Like,
Yes.
we didn't have really much planned in September, so we were looking at our options, and we're like, yeah, we could do this, we could do this. This is a good opportunity to get out there, and we don't really – like, that's the other thing is expectations is such a huge part of that.
Right.
Going into that hunt with the correct expectations, like you'd said, man, hey, the first nice 4-point I see, like I'm
stalking every one of them.
I don't care. Like, I'm just going to go after them. I just enjoy that. I enjoy that hunt.
Yeah.
I enjoy that part of it. I was like, hey, the first good bull I see, legal bull, I'll go after it. It doesn't matter. I'm out in the field. I'm doing what I love.
Yep.
If I come home and get my butt kicked and don't harvest anything, anymore it's really not a big deal to me. Like it used to.
It was a good learning experience. You're in better shape mentally and physically, and you learned something new about new country. You saw brand new vistas, beautiful places that you've never been before.
It used to feel like it would suck my soul out. When I didn't harvest something, I was like, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
I can't believe. Like, look at all these other people that shot and killed bulls. I can't believe I can't even kill. But anymore, I mean, it doesn't bother me. I mean, I know what it is. I know if I put enough effort into it. Now, don't get me wrong. If I come home and I know that I kind of slacked off and I didn't put in as much as I should have,
Right.
yeah, I'll beat myself up a little bit because I'm like, yeah, I lazy-assed out on that one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I didn't put as much effort in as I could. Had I done this, there's probably a chance I would have been successful.
Right.
And that sucks.
No, you left something on the table a little bit.
But I mean, for the most part, if I know I put into it, as much as I could, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me.
No, I know, like, even for years I hunted the Missouri breaks, and I was always looking for a 350-plus type bull. And believe me, there were plenty of guys that killed them on public land or publicly accessible land out there every year. Seemed like all around me. And I killed a lot of nice bulls out there with my bow, but I never killed a 350 bull out there. But, like, on Saturday afternoons, I just had a habit. At that time, our kids were homeschooled. And we would go out there for, I had the luxury of being out there for at least 10 days, usually a weekend, bookend weekends over a week. And every Saturday afternoon, I'd take my kids and wife, and we'd go down to the Missouri River, and we'd catch catfish and have a picnic, and, like, I took the evening off. But that meant more to me at that point in time than just one more. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but, again, that's your why, right? Mm-hmm. Figure out what you need out of a hunt, country-wise, solace-wise, etc. Because the other thing we hear a lot is, I can't believe how often I'll hear a guy that's like, he'll be like, that was the worst hunt I've ever been on. Worst guided experiences. This usually happens more with guided than DIY conversations. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? And did you get one? And, oh, yeah, I killed like a 360 bull, but you would not believe it. The food was terrible and this and this. And I'm like, did I just hear you correct? That you killed a 360 bull and you had the worst hunt of your life, But again, that's sort of aligning expectations with and in some cases I actually empathize with those guys because the experience that they had, maybe there was conflicts in the field between operators, etc. And so it kind of tainted the hunt experience. So the sooner you can kind of get your arms around, like, what do I want? Make sure that you're going to go, commit to going, and be willing to fail.
Yeah.
Be willing to come. And by fail, I hate that word because I've never had a failed hunt, in my opinion. Because my worst day in the field hunting is better than the best day of work I've ever had. And I love what I do.
Well, one of the toughest responses that I get, and this is where I used to be in the same category, and sometimes I'll be that way, but I'm getting more and more away from it. But when I ask a person, well, what do you want out of your hunt? Like, what do you want on your points? Well, the biggest bull I can find. Like, I want the biggest bull, That's really what it comes down to. And I'm like, well, okay, like you got 25 points, 20 points, whatever the point total is. It's like, okay, well, like the biggest bull, like we can put you into a unit that maybe has the best potential. But is that what you, like if you don't kill a 300 bull and you spend it, or you don't kill a 320 bull and you spend it out in the PJs, like just wandering through there chasing tracks, hoping to hear a bugle, like, is that what you wanted?
Right.
Well, no. I mean, I would have rather been up in the mountains. Well, start there.
Yeah, start there, right?
And then and then go from, because the only thing theoretically you can control is your environment.
It's true. Geography.
You can control where you're at. You can control where you put your points if you're going to have a backpack hunt, if you're going to have a mountain hunt, or if you're going to be tracking down bulls in the desert, sifting through cedar trees. And there's some people that absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So for those guys, there's hunts out there for that. For those other guys,
I hate that, by the way.
And it's
That's
not
my least favorite way to hunt anything.
It is not my favorite either. So, but that's where I would rather have the conversation start from.
Yep.
And that's where I've kind of moved to that, because I've had enough hunts where I've chased down. Some have been successful, some haven't. But I've chased down theoretically, the area that I thought held the biggest buck or bull that I could get after, even though the hunt sucked.
Yep.
Like, in my mind, I'm like, well, I got to keep grinding out, because I know sooner or later, I mean, there's some big ones in here.
Big boy's going to show up.
I'm going to find him. Sometimes it worked out. Sometimes it didn't. But those times it didn't, I came away from those hunts thinking this was an absolute waste of time.
Yeah.
This was miserable. This wasn't even fun. And in my mind, I'm like, obviously, whoever said that there was big shit here was wrong, because there wasn't.
Yeah, you would be one of those guys that's like, if you weren't a hunt consultant and didn't realize how much nuance there is to getting lucky in the right place in the right time, you'd be one of those guys that's like, oh, geez, there ain't no big stuff there.
I would come out of there being like, I don't know what they're talking about. There isn't anything big in here. I don't know who said that, and then you're like, oh, well, that guy got lucky.
Yeah,
I don't know how he killed that one.
Because that's easier to reconcile than I just was wrong every single day.
Yes. But that's the thing I learned over time, is I can control at least where I get to spend my time.
Yep.
And I can spend my time chasing animals in country I love, or I love the surroundings or the situation in front of me, or I can spend time chasing animals. Maybe it's in an area that doesn't quite have the potential that I think my points are worth. But to me anymore, it really doesn't matter. I want to spend my time in areas that I just enjoy. And every morning when I wake up, I'm excited to wake up, and I'm not looking around going, man, this is brutal. Yep. I just love getting my butt kicked every single day. I would rather wake up and think it might have been physically taxing to get into an area, or maybe it's physically taxing, or maybe later on in the hunt it can be a little emotionally taxing. But, man, waking up in the morning and just being excited about what the day holds.
To take that first breath of air out there. Yeah.
It is regardless.
Watch that sun peek up over the horizon.
What you find.
Yep.
That is something that is just an amazing feeling in the morning. It makes you want to get up in the morning, not hit the snooze button, not roll over, not wake up after the sun's already cracked halfway up.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Which right now we sound like we're out there to sniff flowers and not kill elk and deer, right? And nothing could be further from the truth. Again, we love to fill our tags too. It's just that you have to find a balance of both. And I love what you just said there, because honestly, I feel the same way. Increasingly, the places that I choose to spend time are places that I know no matter what the hunt outcome is, I'm going to come away from it and be thankful I was on that hunt. Both you and I just got back from a transported Alaska hunt. And granted, both of us were kind of playing the host role, right? Mm-hmm. You took your daughter, Sam. She killed her first bear. Awesome experience. You wouldn't trade that for anything.
Right.
Did you kill a bear?
No.
Right. I didn't either.
Yep.
Right. I had an opportunity, a good stock with my bow. But at the end of the day, I spent 5 days in Alaska on a boat, ripping lips off of black bass and halibut, watching other people fill their bear tag for the first time in their lives. Dude, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yep.
I'd hit rewind on that hunt every single time.
Oh, absolutely. But hunts like that, like you say, that's a prime example of what we're talking about.
Yep.
You control the situation as far as where you were at, what you're doing. You could have had nasty weather, which I think you did.
We were blown off the water 2 days. It took, 2/5 of our hunt was basically sacrificed to the wind gods.
Yeah, and that happens, but you're in a situation that you absolutely wouldn't trade.
Exactly.
It's just so much fun, and knowing that going into it, I spent, I think one of the last good backpack hunts I did was in Wyoming for a deer. Mm-hmm. I mean, we could have easily chose to go up in the northern units and hunt with a gun.
Yep.
I wanted to hunt archery. And I wanted to be in an area where there wasn't as many people. I backpacked for 7 days, covered a ridiculous amount of country, passed on a few deer, saw a ton of elk, saw some bears, just had a ball. Came away from that hunt not just I didn't even like it. It was I would have loved to have taken an animal, and I put so much effort into that, but I was completely happy with it.
Yep.
Like on that bear hunt, and I'll be honest with you, by the time I got done hunting with other guys and coming out of the high country and going on hikes where I thought I was going to fall, skinning out bears, I was like, I will fish.
Yeah, I literally got to the same point of like I'd rather just catch more halibut at this point. Because we skinned a lot of bears and well, that stuff's really, really good. We want to wrap this up, I think. Is there anything else you want to mention that you run into consistently before I kind of summarize a few of our points?
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest point I would make is just like get comfortable with just being out.
With an unsure outcome.
100%. Like
Yep.
don't put ridiculous expectations on something. And when I say ridiculous, like just try to enjoy the hunt, not the harvest. Try to put more emphasis on enjoying the hunt and the exploring and the looking over animals and not get too hung up on looking at an animal and think, man, if I don't take that sucker right now, I might not have a chance at him again. Like the interaction you already had with him was probably what you're going to remember, even if you do harvest that animal. But as soon as you harvest that animal, you're done. Like you can't spend any more time, and you're the king at that. Like
it's the main reason I bow hunt.
I know you just keep going out but you love to just spend every
days.
single time out.
Yep.
Like if you have a 7-day hunt, inevitably you're probably going to hunt 7 days.
Yeah,
and it's not for a lack of trying. It's not because you don't want to harvest,
or even lack of opportunity. Usually,
yeah. Just extend those days because you love being in the field. And once you get to that point, in my opinion, those opportunities will get more and more and more for better age class animals that you're looking for. Because if you like spending time in the field and you don't view it as a grind or something that's just like kicking your butt every single day, and you're excited to wake up, you inevitably spend more time in the field and have more opportunity.
That's a really good point. I don't mean to get us off track on the podcast, but one thing that I've learned the really, really hard way is that humans are the only thing in the woods that are on a time clock. No other animal out there is carrying a watch. No other animal has a calendar. We're the only ones. And so we get out there and we behave like we're on the calendar. We behave like we have a watch. We're worried about, it's almost sundown. I'm almost out of shooting light. It's getting late. I've only got 3 days in my hunt left. And the more frenetic we behave in the woods, the more invasive we are, and therefore the less predatory we are. Because a mountain lion will wait for days for the right opportunity, right? You think about the way we hunt, and it is really, thank God we have modern firearms, or we'd all starve to death, for the most part. And I've been around phenomenal hunters, and the one thing that they share is a huge passion for the outdoors and a comfort in the outdoors, no matter what day of the hunt it is, no matter what time of the day it is, no matter what the conditions are like, no matter how the weather conditions are, wind, rain, hail, thunder, lightning, you name it, the more you can embrace that, the more of a true human predator you'll become.
Yeah, that's 100% right.
Yeah. All right, so just a few things on the analysis side of things when you're looking at burning points, acquiring OTC tags, whatever else. Again, the typical feedback from people who have hunted it in the past is almost always going to be it's not as good as it was. I don't know that I've ever heard the opposite. This is the best it's ever been. Sheep. Okay, yeah, because there's 200 tags a year given to non-residents, right? They baby them.
They're killing giants in this unit, Jerrod. They weren't killing them last year, but that's the only one.
Yeah, so generally speaking, the story's going to sort of de-incentivize you to want to go. Your points can cause you paralysis by analysis because you think, I don't want to leave any points on the table. Secondary information sources that are completely unvetted can really create chaos. It's not that we don't encourage to listen to them or whatever else, but take them for the grain of salt that they bring. And then finally, just human nature tends to make us afraid to fail and therefore afraid to try. And if we had any advice here at Huntin' Fool, it's get your butt out there, spend all kinds of time in the woods. It'll improve your woodsmanship skills, which eventually leads to more success too.
Yeah, I mean, don't don't be concerned with people in the field. I absolutely love running the people in the field, and that's a lot of the reason I hear about people not wanting to go.
Yeah.
They don't want to run anybody.
Sometimes they're the best source of information. A lot of times you'll run into a guy on the way out while you're on the way in, and sitting there for 15 minutes and picking his or her brain, that can be valuable information.
I know you're like me. Like you enjoy people. I've met some very, very good people and some really great friends just by happenstance, running into them in the woods and being like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" "Oh, just hunting deer." "Me too."
Yep.
So
cool.
It's not always a bad thing.
All right. Well, hopefully this has inspired you a little bit to get off the couch. One thing we definitely know, a little saying around here is, I've never killed an elk from the seat of my couch. So get off your couch, get a tag, get in the field. Don't be overcome by paralysis by analysis. And we appreciate your support here at the Built to Hunt podcast. If you like the content, it always helps if you subscribe. Leave us comments, ask us for content that you'd like to see us host and talk about, and we appreciate it, and best of luck in the hunts this fall.